Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're going back in time a little bit to the early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
When home video editing was really just starting to kind of take off, you know? And we've got some really interesting sources here that kind of capture both the excitement and the challenges of that era. We're going to be looking at the technology involved, the techniques people were using, and maybe even uncover some insights that are still relevant to your video projects today.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to look back at that time because the dream of creating like these really professional-looking videos at home, it was so alluring, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was kind of daunting because the technology was evolving so rapidly.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always easy to use.
Right, and one of the sources we have here actually talks about it being the dawning of a new age for personal video, and it goes on to say that anybody can now make a movie like a pro. And, I bet a lot of us who were around back then,
oh yeah,
we felt that pull, right?
Sure.
That sense of creative possibility.
Yeah, and those marketing campaigns were really effective. They really sold that dream.
Yeah.
But the reality is, as this source goes on to point out, there was often a pretty big gap between the aspiration and the actual execution. Think about all those shaky home videos that we all used to watch.
Right.
That they kind of highlight the need for editing to really transform that raw footage into something compelling.
It's a great point. Yeah. And the source actually goes on to kind of break down the basics of how to do that. And they start with this idea of shots as being like the building blocks of a video.
Yeah.
Right. And they use this great example of a birthday party.
Okay.
Where you might have like a wide shot of the cake, and then a close-up of the kids opening presents.
Right.
Things like that. And it sounds so obvious now.
Yeah.
But back then, this was kind of a revolutionary concept for home video makers.
Yeah. And what's really key here is that directors use different types of shots to keep the viewer engaged.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about recording everything that happens.
Yeah.
It's about choosing the right shots to tell a story.
Right.
And to create an emotional impact.
They have this great example of, imagine a scene where someone is talking and they're really upset about something.
Okay.
Right? You could just show them talking head on.
Yeah.
But if you cut away to a close-up of their hands, nervously fidgeting with a tissue, suddenly the scene has a whole different feel to it.
Right. It becomes so much more powerful.
Exactly. And the point the source is making is that you can achieve that same effect in your own videos, right?
Right.
Thinking about different moments where a close-up or a change in angle could really heighten the emotion or add a new layer of meaning to the story you're telling.
That's a great point.
So we've got our shots. We understand the importance of editing, but how did people actually do this back in the early 2000s?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And our source kind of dives into the world of editing software, which was really starting to give home editors access to some pretty cool techniques.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's interesting to see that there was already a range of options back then.
Yeah, there were the high-end systems like Avid that were used in professional studios.
Yeah.
But there were also more accessible setups for people who just wanted to edit at home.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly things evolved. I mean, the source even mentions people using like a camera and a VCR.
Wow.
To do basic editing.
That's crazy.
Can you imagine the patience that must have taken it?
It really puts things in perspective.
But regardless of the setup, the core elements were still the same, right? You needed a camera to capture the footage, a computer to process it,
right.
And of course the editing software to bring it all together.
And this is where the source starts to get into some of the technical details.
Yeah.
Things like firewire connections and mini DV tapes.
Right.
And I know for some of our listeners, those terms might sound a little bit like ancient history.
Yeah, for sure.
But trust me, they were essential back then.
Yeah.
But what I find really interesting is that even what was considered a powerful computer back then could really struggle with video editing.
Oh, yeah.
You had to think about things like CPU power, RAM, hard drive space.
Right.
All these factors could make or break your editing experience.
They even mentioned that a Pentium 3 computer, which was considered pretty high-end at the time, could actually struggle to keep up with the data stream from a camera.
Wow. That's amazing.
And to think that the ideal setup back then was a Pentium 4 or a late model Mac with 512 millibytes to 1 gigabytes of RAM.
That's a museum piece by today's standards.
It really is.
Yeah.
But even with those limitations, people were doing some really amazing things with home video editing back then.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, they were capturing memories, they were sharing their passions, they were experimenting with new ways to tell stories. And you know what? That creative spirit, that's something that's still so relevant today.
Absolutely. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore how those early advancements in the home video editing actually started to influence the broader media landscape.
Ooh, yes.
You might be surprised by some of the connections we uncover.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
Let's jump in. So those early home editing setups with their FireWire connections and their mini DV tapes, they were really the starting point for this whole new era of video creation, right? It wasn't just about preserving family memories anymore. It was about, the power to tell stories and share them with the world.
And one of the things our sources highlight is that those technical limitations, they actually forced people to be more creative with their editing.
Interesting.
They couldn't just rely on, fancy effects or tons of footage. They really had to make every shot count.
That's a really good point. It's like those constraints actually pushed people to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And come up with innovative solutions.
Exactly. And as the software evolved, it gave home editors even more control over their creations. They could rearrange shots, trim clips, and really, fine-tune the narrative flow of their videos.
Right. The source mentions Adobe Premiere, which was already a pretty powerful program back then, and it's still widely used today. I remember those early versions. You could add transitions, adjust audio levels, and even create special effects.
Yeah, and some of those effects became pretty iconic, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
The star wipes the page curl.
Totally.
It's funny how certain editing techniques become so closely associated with a particular era.
Yeah, it's true. But beyond those flashy effects, what really struck me was this idea that editing software gave people the ability to shape their own narratives. It's like taking those raw ingredients, the shots you captured, and transforming them into this cohesive story that you want to share with others.
It's almost like a democratization of storytelling, right? Where anyone with a camera and a computer could become a filmmaker in their own right.
Yeah.
And that had a huge impact, not just on, personal video creation, but on the broader media landscape as well.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Our sources talk about how this surge in home video editing actually led to a rise in independent filmmaking.
Oh, yeah.
Aspiring directors and producers, they no longer needed, this expensive studio equipment to bring their visions to life.
Right.
They could shoot and edit their films using, relatively affordable home setups.
And that really opened doors for so many voices that might not have been heard otherwise. We're talking about a whole new wave of creativity and diversity in filmmaking, driven by people who were passionate about telling their stories, regardless of budget or background.
It's incredible to think about the impact that had on the film industry, but it wasn't just about feature films, right?
No, not at all.
Home video editing also fueled the growth of online video content, which was just starting to emerge in the early 2000s.
Absolutely. Think about those early YouTube videos, those quirky blogs, those DIY tutorials.
Right.
They were all made possible by the accessibility of home editing software.
Right.
It was like a wild west of creativity out there with people experimenting with different formats, styles, and genres.
Yeah.
And, that really paved the way for the explosion of online video content that we see today.
It's amazing to think that those humble beginnings in home editing studios helped to shape the very fabric of the internet as we know it.
And the influence of home video editing even trickled up to the professional realm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as more and more people became familiar with editing techniques and software, it started to influence the aesthetics and the storytelling approaches used in mainstream media.
That's fascinating. I never realized there was such a connection.
Think about the rise of reality TV in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Those shows often employed a fast-paced jump-cut editing style that was very similar to what people were doing in their home videos.
I see what you mean. It's like those home editing techniques became part of the visual language of popular culture.
Exactly, and it wasn't just reality TV.
Yeah.
Even scripted shows and films started to incorporate some of those techniques.
Right.
Giving them a more dynamic and edgy feel. So in a way, home video editing helps to blur the lines between amateur and professional, between DIY and mainstream media.
It's like this whole new hybrid form of storytelling emerged, where the techniques and aesthetics of home video editing started to influence the way professionals were telling stories as well.
And that's what makes this whole journey so fascinating. It's not just about the technology itself.
Yeah.
It's about the cultural shifts and the creative innovations that it sparked.
Right. We started this deep dive by talking about the dream of creating studio-quality videos at home, but it turned into something so much bigger than that.
It really did.
So while the technical side was definitely a challenge back then, our sources also highlight the incredible impact home video editing had on the way we tell stories, both personally and professionally.
And, even with all the advancements in technology since then, those early pioneers of home video editing, they taught us some really valuable lessons about creativity, resourcefulness, and the power of storytelling.
And those are lessons that are still relevant today.
Absolutely.
But before we get too nostalgic, let's take a look at how those early trends in home video editing have evolved and shaped the world of video creation that we see today. What do you say we dive into that?
I'm ready when you are. Let's explore how the legacy of home video editing continues to shape the way we create and consume video content.
It's incredible to think about how those early home video editing enthusiasts really paved the way for this explosion of video content we see everywhere today. I mean, who would have thought that those grainy videos edited on a Pentium 4 would eventually lead to the slick productions we see on, platforms like YouTube and TikTok?
I know, it's really remarkable. And, as we dig deeper into these sources, it becomes clear that home video editing wasn't just like a technological shift.
Right.
It was a cultural one. It changed the way we think about storytelling, the way we consume media, and even the way we interact with each other.
So let's talk about some of those specific changes. What are some of the key ways that home video editing has evolved and influenced the video landscape as a whole?
Well, one of the most obvious changes is just the sheer accessibility of video creation tools. I mean, back in the early 2000s, you needed a dedicated camera, you needed a computer, you needed specialized software to edit videos. Today, you can shoot, edit, and share high-quality videos right from your smartphone.
And the software itself has become so much more user-friendly.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't need a degree in computer science to figure out how to use it.
Right.
There are tons of apps and programs out there that are intuitive and easy to learn, even for complete beginners.
Exactly, and that ease of use has just led to this explosion of creativity. People are experimenting with different formats, styles, and genres. We've seen the rise of vlogs, short films, documentaries, animated explainer videos. I mean, the possibilities are pretty much endless.
It's almost like everyone has the potential to be a filmmaker now.
Right.
And, that brings up another interesting point, the rise of the influencer.
Oh, yeah.
These are people who have built these massive followings online by creating and sharing their own video content.
And a lot of them got their start using, basic home video editing tools.
Yeah.
They learned how to tell stories, engage an audience, and build a community online. And that's had a huge impact on the marketing and advertising industries as well.
Oh, for sure.
Brands are now partnering with influencers to reach new audiences and promote their products in a more authentic and engaging way.
It's a completely different landscape from the days of traditional media.
Yeah.
And one of the things our sources emphasize is that this shift towards online video content has also changed the way we consume media.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're no longer passively watching television. We're actively seeking out content that interests us online.
Right.
And we're interacting with that content in new ways, liking, commenting, sharing, and even creating our own responses.
It's a much more participatory experience.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about entertainment either.
Right.
Online video platforms have become powerful tools for education, activism, and social change.
I mean, think about all the educational videos on YouTube, the documentaries raising awareness about important issues, the citizen journalists documenting events as they happen.
Right.
Video has become this powerful tool for amplifying voices and sharing perspectives that might not have been heard otherwise.
It's truly remarkable how far we've come from those early days of home video editing, and it's exciting to think about what the future holds for video creation. What trends do you see emerging on the horizon?
Well, one trend that's already gaining a lot of momentum is the use of artificial intelligence in video editing.
Oh, wow.
There are now tools that can automatically transcribe audio ad captions and even suggest edits based on your footage.
That sounds incredible. It's like having a virtual assistant helping you create your videos.
It really is. And what about virtual reality and augmented reality?
Yeah.
How do you see those technologies shaping the future of video?
That's a great question.
Those are definitely areas to watch. VR and AR have the potential to create truly immersive video experiences that really blur the lines between reality and fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine watching a concert from the front row or exploring a historical site as if you were actually there.
Wow. Yeah, the possibilities are pretty much endless.
They really are.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway is that video has become this incredibly powerful medium for communication, storytelling, and connection.
And it all started with those early pioneers of home video editing who had the passion and the vision to see the potential of this technology. They may not have known it at the time, but they were laying the groundwork for a revolution that would change the way we consume and create media forever.
So for all of you out there who are passionate about video, remember that you're part of a long and vibrant legacy. Keep experimenting, keep pushing the boundaries, and who knows, maybe your work will be the next to shape the future of video.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.